Whether you keep them in your home or love to see them in theirs, these are the creatures that bring us all together.
Reptiles. We're going to be delving into the experiences of reptile lovers from around the block and around the world. This is the Reptile Talk Podcast. Boom! What is up, everybody? This is Jeremy Turgeon from Brassman Reptiles.
And I'm Rob, and I'm keeping it real.
Rob, what did you do to your lighting situation? Because something's changed from...
Yeah, I have this like really bright strip light, and I was like, it was a little too dark in here, and I was like, I wonder if I throw this strip light, but face it like away from me, if that'll be enough. And I think that it just did what I needed it to do.
It looks great.
Yeah, hell yeah,
it looks great. All right, so we're in the midst of a flurry of episodes. So if you're watching on YouTube, you're getting a bunch of reptile talk right now. And if you're one of our audio only listeners, then you're going to hear this in a couple weeks. And if you can't wait a couple of weeks to hear from Josh Ortiz, then get your ass over to YouTube, the Reptile Talk Podcast. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, and bam, there's a cameo from Teddy the dog behind me. But yeah, super stoked tonight, as well as every night's episode, is brought to you by Black Box Cages. Shout out to Black Box Cages. And now you can use code Reptile Talk in the checkout and save a little bit off the top of your cage order. So go get some cages, guys. Yeah. And save a little bit of money, because everybody wants to save money right now.
That's where it's at, man.
That is it. Dude, I'm super stoked. I'm not going to ask you how you're doing, because we talked about that yesterday, but how was your day, Rob?
It was okay. It was actually not horrendously cold during the majority of today while I was outside, so
very nice.
That was nice. And then tomorrow is my birthday, so I'm gonna be going herping a little bit tomorrow. It's gonna be 51 degrees, so I'm not expecting to see anything. Maybe I'll see some salamanders or something.
Salamanders.
Yeah, that's okay. I like salamanders too, so I'm gonna go out. And then Saturday is the Greenville show, so I think that I might go check that out because they have venomous there, and I just want to stare at it all.
Yes. I contemplated making that trip, but
it's a haul, man. It's I think it's like an hour and 20 from me, or like over an hour from me. I'm like,
yeah,
I don't really want to drive an hour there and an hour back, but I do want to see venomous snakes in person.
Yep, that's fair.
I'll do it. I'm gonna say it's for my birthday and then treat myself.
Boom, there you go. Do it and enjoy it. Heck yeah, dude. I'm here for it.
How are you doing? How was your day?
I'm doing good, man. My day has been chaotic. I've been on the go from I don't even remember when in the hell I woke up. 8:30 to something this morning. Through to now, still going. We're gonna record these episodes, and then I still got more work to do. So just keep on going. It never ends, dude. It never ends. I wish I could be like Josh and just put all my animals in boxes to go to sleep for the winter.
I don't know if it's all his animals, but it's a decent.
It's a good majority for what we just saw before we started. So without further ado, let's get the man in here.
The myth, the legend.
Hello, Mr. Josh.
Hey, baby, how you doing?
Good, I'm doing good. Oh, he said it great.
He did say it.
I'm scared.
I'm gonna send you a birthday gift, okay?
Oh,
God!
Is it a selfie?
I want you to be surprised. You're gonna be shocked.
This could be good or bad, guys. It could shocked is. It could be good or bad.
Oh, good times.
So, Josh, how are you doing today?
Good, busy, really busy. We're actually building another. Jeremy, you've been here. We have a few buildings here. We're actually putting up another building right next to one of our barns. So that's really exciting. But literally, like, I stopped like maybe 15 minutes before this podcast, and I was like, oh, I gotta go on the podcast now. But we're building another building because we're going to have more veranded cages, like really large cages.
Ooh,
and so we're expanding doing that because our laces are getting big, our Spencers are getting big. So basically we have a lot of stuff to be raised up that basically are outgrowing their previous enclosures. So, and they have indoor outdoor runs too. So
yes, dude, I'm stoked to see that.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about that. But we have a lot going on here. We're gonna add more emus. We got emu eggs here. We have tons and
Did you
tons
get
of stuff.
eggs?
Yeah, we have emu eggs. Yeah, yeah.
Heck yeah,
Usually
dude.
they lay anywhere from like 5 to 20 eggs, and I think we're up to like a dozen eggs or so from one female. So it's pretty exciting.
Damn.
Yeah, it's not an
Wait,
That's a
how
emu
lot.
long?
podcast,
That's a lot
but
of emu.
yeah, no, it's pretty interesting too because everyone was like, "Just take the eggs. The male's gonna leave you alone. It's not a big deal." I went.
Oh,
I wanted to kill me.
I wish. See, Josh, this is content the world needs to see.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually gonna post it. I took a video because when they make their facial expression, they're like grimacing. Like you can see their brows go down and everything. And then the
Oh
male hisses at
man.
you. And they're smart. It looks like a raptor. That's actually what they designed the raptors after in Jurassic Park, after like emus running and stuff like that. So
that's terrifying.
Dang.
I'm not gonna lie, that's terrifying. To me, terrifying.
yeah, no, I'm the only one that goes in there with them. They're about my height now. They're pretty tall.
Dude,
Sheesh. Yeah,
that's
Josh.
wild.
Josh is closer to being one of the actual tallest reptile keepers in the industry. If
Yes.
you miss the last joke from the previous episode,
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think
gosh.
Jason Hood has me beat though. I think so.
He is so
Yeah,
tall.
he is a tall man.
Cool.
So tall.
Yeah,
Dude.
man.
So when you were like, I'm super busy right now, I was like, but there's so much that's brumating right now. This is supposed to be when it's less busy, but with expansions and everything, you still got a lot of stuff still going on.
Yeah, well, the main thing that stays up is most of our varanids.
Mhm.
Because I mean, you guys know we have. I mean, I don't know if you guys had specific questions, so you guys can interrupt me. But we have the Salvatore, the Cumini, the Samarensis, Mertens, Lace, Spencers, Spinulosis. We have a few different species of dwarf monitors. That's just off the top of my head. We have quite a few species here. We have the Quince monitors. So I mean, some of my monitors do get cooler. They do brumate. So so that basically the Spencers and the Lace they cool down. But besides the Spencers and the Lace, I mean, I have a few species that could tolerate cooler temperatures, like Mertens, for example, are reasonably cold tolerant, but they do not brumate. And then you also I have some albigularis, and I don't have the Cape Banded form though of white throat. So those are the only ones that truly brumate to my knowledge. So, anyways, we do have a lot of stuff to keep us busy. So we probably work maybe half as much in the winter in terms of animal care, but that's when we try to expand infrastructure in the winter. So.
Hell yeah.
Heck yeah, dude.
Dude, you said you got spinulosis?
Mhm.
I love those monitors.
I'm pretty sure I have 4 females, though. I'm almost positive. Yeah.
That's a little frustrating.
Yeah, and I got them when they were tiny babies because I don't know about for you guys, but for me, usually when I raise something up when it's quite young and raise it under my conditions, I get the best results. So I got these guys as tiny babies, and I got 4 of them, thinking that I should have at least 1 male and 1 female. And I'm pretty confident that they're all female because you can actually ultrasound them with a standard ultrasound that we use in the industry. The depth works out well, and 2 of them are definitely females because they have follicles. And the other 2 that are smaller, when I ultrasounded them, I didn't see follicles. But I'm pretty confident they're likely females as well. So we'll see what happens then.
Dude, those are such a cool species, and there's not a whole lot of people working with them. Like I think Ryan McVeigh has got some, but I don't know anyone else who's really.
There's someone breeding them. I don't know offhand, but I know of at least of one person currently breeding them. But I mean, right now I'm trying to transition to medium-sized species and smaller species. There's nothing wrong with the big species. But for me, I mean, we covered this before. For me, the larger the lizard is, the less of it I usually breed, because I want to make sure that people could like responsibly house them, and that there's good homes for them and everything like that. And it's tough when you have a large anything, right? A large dog is tough. So a large lizard or a large snake is more challenging. So I do produce larger lizards, but once it gets like tegus to me kind of bleed into that large zone. So usually my limit is around tegu size or smaller. So that's why I'm exploring some of the smaller stuff. Quince, I want to get peach throats. I've been really into the roughnecks recently. I want to get like monitors, anything that's like around the 3-4 foot range. And plus also I just want some change, so a little bit more variety here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because we've had success with the Salvatore, the Semorensis, the Mertens, the Cumini, all that stuff, and I really enjoy those species, and we could talk more about them. But sometimes you just kind of want to change it up and do something different, right?
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. How about the Australian water dragons, though?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the Australian water dragons. Those are a perfect size. And here, yeah, that's a really good one. So I had so much trouble breeding Australian water dragons for years,
Mhm.
years.
Mhm.
And because I had those guys for before they started regularly producing for me, I would say at least 5 years. Right. One issue I had was I had a bunch of females and a single male. Right.
Mhm.
So that was one problem. Another problem I had is I wasn't getting them cold enough. Because people
Mhm.
hear about them getting cold. I'm sure you guys know that they brumate, right?
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah.
Um, so they occur like in New South Wales, Victoria. They occur where it gets really, really cold. And basically, I would get nervous, right? So if they would get below like 50 odd degrees, I would pull them in, and that was the worst mistake I could have made. They really need
Really?
those nights
Mm.
where it's in the 30s, where it's in the 40s. They need that. So
Sheesh.
yeah.
See, that, to me, I think water dragon. My mind just goes to the Asian one with the green water dragons,
Mhm.
and I'm
Mhm.
like 30 degrees. Oh my god, it's gonna die. But they're completely different. So, and oh my god, so the key you found is just getting them colder to get them to be able to reproduce for you.
Yeah, basically. If you guys hear a railroad in the background, part of the property borders like an old like freight railroad, and you guys might hear. If you do, just let me know. Anyways, um,
That's how Josh gets his animals in, just on train.
it's actually pretty cool because we have like probably like an acre or two of swamp. Because we're fortunate enough to have a decent amount of land here. So there's
Mhm.
an acre or two of swamp bordering near the railroad. So there's a lot of good herping there. I see cottonmouths, I
Mhm.
see all kinds of stuff. But
Oh,
anyway,
Yeah.
so in terms of the Australian water dragon, they do need to get really cold. When it gets down to 30s, 40s, you really need to leave them out. You can't get
mm,
nervous and give them supplemental heat. You can't get nervous and pull them inside because whenever I did that, my fertility was pretty low. I would get a lot of infertile
Interesting.
eggs, one or two good eggs per clutch, and
mhm,
I didn't have good success until I left them out. I mean, last night it was in the 20s here. We had a really strong cold front. It was in the
yeah,
20s. They stayed outside. So
damn,
basically, what I have for them is an
Yeah.
insulated cooler. That's look at Jimmy's face. An insulated cooler that's within their enclosure, right? So
mhm,
and I cover it with plastic. So they have a south-facing enclosure, so it gets the sun during the day. I put a lot of decor in there that absorbs a lot of heat, so it slowly dissipates it at night. So like different types of rocks, even the type of substrate I use absorbs all that heat. I put things in there that decompose to bring up the heat as well. And within that enclosure, that 6x6 enclosure, they have a cooler. So the cooler obviously doesn't get as cold as it is outside, right? So
mhm,
it has a barrier there, and they stay out. If it's 20 some odd degrees, they stay out. I even had in the temperature in the teens last year. I think that's like 17, 18 degrees.
mhm.
They were outside. You
Wow.
really
Gosh.
have to leave them. I mean, the important thing, the caveat to that is they're not exposed to the wind. They're not
Yeah,
exposed to those elements, right?
Right, right,
Because in the
right.
wild, it's not as if they're going to say, "Oh, it's 35 degrees. Let me just sit on this branch in the open and just
yeah,
let the wind all over me. Let me get rained on. I'm going to be perfect," right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
they're finding these nooks and crannies, and they're finding warmer microclimates where they're protected from a lot of moisture. They're protected from wind. They're protected from all the extremes. And that's all I provide in their enclosure. You give them a ton of options, and particularly options where they could be protected from the elements, and you just let them be. And then you'll
Mm,
get good production. At least that's my experience. I can't speak of anyone else's experience, but that's what worked
right,
really well for me. We were fortunate. We got a few dozen eggs this year, and
mhm.
they all hatched out. So and their hatch rate is extremely high. I literally didn't lose. If an egg didn't go bad within the first week, it hatched.
It hatched. That's
So unless it had
awesome.
like
Man.
a significant issue from the start,
Mhm.
those eggs hatch. They're super hardy eggs. So
And what temp are you incubating them at?
okay, that's a good question. So usually, if you incubate them between 78 and 82, you get males, right?
Okay.
For me, I was actually because last year I incubated for males, and I actually have males that are raised up from last year and the year before. So this
Mm,
year I incubated them at my monitoring incubator. So it was at 86 degrees. So I
mhm,
should get most, if not all, females in theory. But you know how that works, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So I've incubated crocodilians at female temperatures and got males, and vice versa. The same thing with some of my tortoises we breed here. I've incubated them because a lot of them are temp sex for males and got females, and vice versa. But in theory, I should get mostly females.
Mm. I think it's interesting too because like when it comes to the Australian water dragons, a lot of people I find when I talk about them, they're like, I just want a male. I just want because they got that they're bulky, they got the nice coloration on or they can have the nice coloration on them and stuff. And I find that the people I know who like really before they were even like readily available at all, before there was anyone really breeding them, the people I know who tried to get them always ended up with females, and they were always frustrated because they're like, I just want like a big bulky display male that's just like hefty and they just look so cool.
Well, you know what it is because the temp range for the males is so minute. It's only like around like high 70s to very low 80s. You could
Mm,
actually incubate them below 78 degrees, and within reason, they'll hatch, right?
wow,
And
yeah,
if you go above 82 degrees within reason, some people incubate them like at 90 degrees, and they'll hatch. But those are ranges for
God.
females, right?
yeah,
So the range for a male is so small. Therefore, most of the ones that you see out there are female, and that's the problem I had too. But if you think about it, that's actually advantageous for them too, because in the
yeah.
wild
Let's
they need
say
way
that.
more females than males, right?
Hmm.
True.
So
That's
They
true.
need
I
one
think that's
cool
part of the reason.
year.
I mean, they're extremely hardy animals, really interesting.
Mm, hmm. Dude, that's awesome.
Heck yeah, dude.
That's
Yeah,
so
so
cool.
basically, what my plan is with that, I know a couple breeders of Australian water dragons, and I'm actually gonna switch animals just so I have kind of like new blood
Trade
because we
out
have
for.
a few dozen
Mhm.
animals here, and I microchip all my animals here, and I'm gonna get the opposite sex for my breeding groups. Because do know a
Heck
few
yeah.
people in Florida that are breeding them, and actually in Alabama as well, because I'm sure you guys know Burt Langerworth was based
Bert.
out there in
Yep.
Montalvo.
Yep.
Yep.
So
Hmm.
there's actually two or three breeders around there that breed them on a small scale, and so I've traded animals with them. So that's the plan with those guys. But to me, I think they make the perfect pet because they're a bit bigger than like a bearded dragon, maybe a little bit or along the lines of like a blue tongue size. But that's that perfect pet size for people, right?
Hmm.
That's true.
And they're extremely hardy. They could take really low temperatures. They could take really high temperatures. They could be a little bit flighty when they're little, but I've never had one even open its mouth to me. A
Hmm.
baby, an adult, and anything. So they could tame down extremely well, and they're technically omnivores. Even though I feed mine primarily insects, I'll feed them roaches and I'll feed them crickets and things like that. I also feed them certain types of sweet fruit like blueberries, and I'll feed
Hmm.
them bananas. So they're omnivores, so they have a varied diet. But whenever you have an animal that's like a perfect size, varied diet, pretty good temperament, and it's just really pretty and unique, I mean
Hmm.
that's a great pet there, right?
Yeah,
That's true.
exactly,
That's
exactly. And
true.
I think that the reason why they're not like more popular is just because a lot of people don't see them. They see the like Asian water mars or like bearded dragons are getting pushed so heavy, and crested geckos are getting pushed so heavy that people just don't know that there's this like really awesome medium sized, like small medium sized lizard that fits the bill to be a really great pet.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it's good. I mean, I think they're going to go up in popularity because recently I have noticed quite a few people breeding them, and even people that haven't heard of them before, when they see one, especially when they see the males, they're like, "Oh my
Hmm.
They're
god,
like,
this is
whoa.
amazing!"
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to produce a decent amount so that they could be a more affordable for people.
Yeah.
Because
Mhm.
that's also what you need too, because you want it to basically be at a price point, from a business standpoint where it's worth it for you to breed them,
Hmm.
obviously, but you also want it to be affordable for like, the average mom that's going to buy, an animal for someone at like a reptile show or something like that, right? You really want that sweet spot. And
Yeah.
certain
Right.
animals have that, like red tegus have that, lacerdas have that, but
Mhm.
Australian water dragons, they're not ridiculously priced, but they're still, out the price point
It's
of
so
some
low.
people. So
Yeah.
it's just outside of there, but yeah, I think they're one of the best species. And for me, if it goes outside, it's amazing. It goes
Yeah.
outside. It's perfect. So
Exactly.
because we talked about this before, but the biggest thing with a collection of any size is really cage maintenance, right? So
Mhm.
I don't think it's easy at all to have an outdoor operation. It's actually quite challenging. To me, it's way more challenging to set up your initial enclosure and make sure you meet all the parameters where they're literally going to be outside and be fine in the elements, right? That's
Mhm.
a big
Mhm.
deal. And you have to really be attentive to things, right? In the winter, you have to cover them at certain times, and in the spring, you have to uncover them. In the summer, they have to have misting systems. So the setup is way more intricate. But in terms of regular maintenance, once you have the setup dialed in, you're good to go. So for me, since I like so many different kinds of animals, I can't have a bunch of animals that are super high maintenance in terms of like daily care.
Right. Right.
Because then I have to limit what I have or hire employees. And I have one or two people that help me out. But when it comes to the reptiles, I'm greedy. I'm the one that takes care of the reptiles. They help me out with the rodents. They help me build things, but maybe here and there they'll help me with something with reptiles. But if I need help for it, then honestly, I don't want it. So that's kind of my
That's fair.
mentality with that. So I'm really greedy with that. But yeah, for outdoor keeping, I mean, we could talk about that for a bit if you guys had questions or whatever questions you guys have. Where do you want to jump?
Well, I was just gonna ask if you do any supplemental heat on any of the outside enclosures.
I used to. I actually used to do it for the Australian water dragons. And
Mm.
what happened is every year I would say, well, this year they did fine down to 35 without supplemental heat. Let me see if they could take 30. I'm like, okay, they could take it. Then I'm like, oh, well, let me see if they could take 25. Oh, they could take it. So then last year when it got down to like 18 degrees, when we had a really bad
I
cold front
remember
in the
that.
middle of
Yeah.
January, I was like,
Mhm.
I think they might be okay. And they were fine. So currently, all my enclosures are set up with supplemental heat. I have little heat pads in there with their hides, similar to like a lot of outdoor keepers do in Florida.
Yeah.
But I don't really use it. The only species that I have supplemental heat for outdoors, and I actually utilize it a lot, is my Cyclura, my rhino iguanas, because I
Mhm.
actually built basically it's kind of an indoor outdoor system. They have a large box. It's an 8x4 box that's 4 feet tall, and they go in there every single night during the cool season. And then I have greenhouse plastic over the entire structure in the
Mhm.
cold season. So basically during the daytime here, the average day, and today was considered a cold day, it was 58 degrees and sunny. If you went in their enclosure that was covered with greenhouse plastic, they were outside of their hides because in there it was actually quite warm. It was at
Yep.
least in the
Right.
upper 70s, if not higher, and their
Mhm.
body temps were extremely high because they're basically solar panels reptiles, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the only ones that really get supplemental heat are my rhino iguanas. But in terms of all the temperate species I have, which would be I have Shinosaurus outside, I have my Lacerdas outside, I have painted agamas outside, I have Australian water dragons outside, I have at least a dozen species of box turtles and tortoises outside, and none of them have supplemental. None of them utilize the supplemental heat. I don't plug it in. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Damn, that's wild, man. The Shinosaurus to me, like I don't know as much about them, so I think of them. I don't know. In my mind, I think about them as a little more tropical. So it's interesting that they're tolerant enough to handle that.
Well, actually, yeah, they're actually the most cold tolerant species I have out there. I actually have to set
Hmm.
them up underneath my
Hmm.
water oak tree because they have to get dappled sun, sporadic sun. If they're in direct sun, it's actually extremely stressful for them. They could die. They could overheat really easily. So they're
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
most cold tolerant animals I have. So even in the winter time, they're not getting direct sun at any point in time. And then I basically have a
Interesting.
pot that goes about a foot into the ground, and I
Hmm.
put a lot of different rocks in there, and that's where they go, and it stays dry. It's covered, and they go in there in the winter. And in the winter, I don't change out their water. I don't do anything. They literally don't come out at all. I don't see them for months at a time. I do a
Wow.
health check on them every few weeks initially in the winter, but once we're well into the winter, I only check on them like once a month. If anything, I
Mhm.
honestly think it disturbs them. It's actually negative. I
Yeah.
understand why people
Right.
do it
Right.
because they're paranoid just like I am, but the more you disturb them in my experience, the more of an issue it winds up being because they're not used to that. They're not accustomed to that. I mean, there's certain reptiles that do come out during brumation. Like I have rat snakes all the time that are literally basking on my back field all the time.
Right.
So it really
Right.
depends on the animals. You can't really put a blanket over it, but certain species, at least certain ones I have here, don't come out that often in the winter. The exceptions for what I have here would be the painted agamas. Those guys come out. They're very cold tolerant, more cold tolerant than I would expect. And the Australian water dragons. The Australian water dragons, almost daily, they'll come out and they'll be looking for food. I don't feed them in the cold season, but they're extremely cold tolerant. It's the most cold tolerant lizard I've ever worked with. Period.
That's
Wow.
Well,
impressive.
besides maybe the Shinosaurus, but I'm talking about in terms of being cold tolerant and being active at cold temperatures, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Damn.
It's just crazy because you think Australia, and the last thing you think about is cold.
Well,
So,
yeah, I
They
mean,
still
I
do
used
have
to
a
think
winter
that
there.
too, but then
right,
once
they
I
do.
really got into cold tolerant species and temperate, when you're talking about like Eastern Australia, the further you go south, because they're on the opposite hemisphere, right? So
Mhm.
usually on this side of the hemisphere, we think south, we think warmer, right? But in Australia, more south is colder. You're getting further from the equator.
Right.
Anyways, but in Victoria and New South Wales area, which is like the southeast portion of Australia, it gets cold. I mean, there's portions of Australia that get snow.
Yep.
Um,
True.
so anything, I mean, I don't want to say I don't like speaking in absolutes, but I think many of the species that they have like in New South Wales or further south,
Mhm.
um, I think could live here and and when I say here, I mean in South Carolina, Central South Carolina, and do well, assuming
Mhm.
that they have a good
Mhm.
setup. I think honestly that skinkoides, the eastern blue tongues could
Mhm.
probably do well out here. So
Damn.
Um, I actually was speaking to Ron St. Pierre about that, and he was giving me some feedback because with him, he's probably the best outdoor keeper alive currently, right? At least in my
Mhm.
opinion.
Yeah.
And I think that certain species of blue tongues would do well out here too. The northerns, I would be pretty nervous because they're not as cold tolerant as like eastern blue tongues and
Mhm.
alpines and things like that. But I do think that the skinkoides, and the Nigra latia could live well out here. Are you guys familiar with blue tongues or?
A little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. I know a little bit about the northerns, and then I really like the westerns, the blotch ones.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure.
I just think we should do an entire podcast where Josh says skinkoidy, skinkoidy, like a bunch more times. That's just a fun word.
Yeah, yeah, that'll be exciting. Um, but yeah, so for me with cold tolerant stuff, I mean that's really my thing. And then basically during the cold season is when like I said, I'll work on infrastructure, and then I have most of my varanids are up, the more warmer species, and then my snakes are up. But nowadays, I don't breed too many snakes. I bred snakes for a long time. I'm saying that, and I actually had a litter of anacondas last week, and I
Oh
have
damn!
another.
Oh,
Yeah,
heck yeah, dude.
and I have another anaconda that we were looking at her today, and I was like, I think she's gonna drop today. I think she's gonna drop
Oh,
today. We have two
Damn.
females. But yeah, I breed snakes pretty much for fun now, just because I mean I love snakes. I love all species of snakes. I have many species here. But as you guys know, for a long, long time, I was just breeding snakes. So I
mhm.
Yeah.
kind of transitioned over to lizards in my 30s. So and that's what I do now. So um, but yeah, no, I like the winter. It's a nice time to kind of plan things out, get a little bit of a break and everything. So, and I still enjoy the varanids. Honestly, that's when I go really hard at the varanids is in the winter time,
Mhm.
because once it's spring, summer, early fall, I'm pretty much have all my attention on my outdoor species, and I don't even try to breed or produce any of my indoor animals. And then
Mm.
once the cold season comes, that kind of reverses. So, and we're fortunate here. Like I don't know if you guys had questions about varanids, but did you guys see the samarensis I posted earlier? The Varanus
Oh.
samarensis, the Samar
No,
water
I don't
monitor?
think so.
Yeah, so anyway, so I have the samarensis, and we produce the Kamini here. Those are both Philippine species, the monitors. And then we have the Salvatore, and I have a lot of raise ups for those. And the Mertens, those are the ones I'm actively producing now. And Argus eggs. We have quite a few Argus eggs as well.
Oh, heck
Um,
yeah.
so, I mean, for me with the Varanids, I'm more so trying to get into things that are challenging for me to breed. That's why I like the Samarensis, for example. To get that
Mhm.
female to cycle was almost impossible. Like it took me 5 years before I got a clutch from that female that I had here.
Damn.
And as you guys know, I bred a lot of monitors before. It's not as if it was like the first monitor species I bred.
Right.
With Salvatore, we had a few dozen clutches between different females. Bred Mertens really well. But the Samarensis are a good species. They have a high contrasty look, similar to like a Guru water
Mhm.
monitor, and
Mhm.
they stay about 4 feet. The female that produces for me, she's like a little over 3 feet, like maybe 3.5 feet,
Mhm.
and they climb really, really well, almost like a tree monitor. Like I have all these
Mm.
ladders and different things in their enclosure. They go on the studs, climb straight up with the studs.
Damn. So kind of like they got the crazy claws like the coming eye.
No, I think it's sharper than the common eye actually. 'Cause the
Ah,
common eye do have
no.
pretty sharp claws for sure. Um,
God.
I think it's definitely sharper than the common eye. Um, And I think their temperament also with the babies I have, they're really placid temperaments, which is surprising
Mm.
because the first time we produced them last year or the year before was the first time they were produced in the U.S. and now it's like the third time. This is my third clutch I've produced here, and the babies are actually pretty placid. Because for Kamani, for example, we haven't been breeding them that long in this country, and
Mhm.
a lot of Kamani kind of start out pretty spastic. They're kind of jumping all
Yeah.
over the place. They remind me of baby rhino iguanas. Like baby rhino
Mhm.
iguanas are nuts usually,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and then, but usually after a few weeks, once you work with a common eye for a month or two, they're just as placid as a Salvatore. But
Mm.
I mean, in terms of being like a calm animal, Salvatore for Varanids is tough to beat.
Yeah.
Because they've
Yeah,
been
yeah.
bred for many generations. And I mean, nowadays, if you produce Salvatore, 9 times out of 10, it's extremely placid. You almost have to do something to make it temperamental, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, so hence why there's a lot of people, working with Salvatore, and I love Salvatore. We have a decent amount here, and I produce them. But I just wanted to, do something that's a little bit less represented and stuff. So
Hell
Yeah.
yeah.
And
And
also just easier to maintain, right? As you were saying before, like, Salvatore are great, but you get some massive adults and it's like not too many people are keen on that.
yeah, the big thing for me, I mean, I love Salvatore. We've had Salvatore when I
Right.
was really young. We got our first Salvatore. I was like 7 or 8 years old when my family got their first Salvatore. So I've had them for a really long time. So I really love Salvatore. But to be perfectly honest with you, they do get pretty large and they're extremely, in my opinion, they're pretty straightforward to breed, right?
yeah.
Mhm.
And that combination, it's kind of like almost like a retic, right? Retics are great animals. I love retics, right? But they get very large and they're pretty straightforward to breed, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So for me, usually, if the larger the snake and the larger the lizard, the less of it I want to produce. So because we could
Right.
produce way more here, I could produce triple or quite a bit more than we produce the Salvatore. But they're great animals. But for me, if it's bigger, I produce less of them. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to skip over congratulating you on the Samarensis because that's huge, man.
Yeah. Hell
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, no, I'd have to do a I appreciate it. I'm gonna have to do another post about it because I basically did a post. I had a black dragon, a coral albino, which we
Yeah,
produced here,
the
and the
three of them
Samaranch
together.
to the right. So I'm gonna do another post about it. I stopped posting them because every time I would post, people like, "Oh, are you gonna sell them? Are you gonna sell them?" And I wanted to
Mhm.
keep them, so
Yes.
Right.
I
Right.
stopped posting them. So, but now this clutch, I'm actually willing to part with some because I have a decent amount of them.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So now that I feel pretty comfortable with the amount I have, I'm parting with some. So that's why I started posting them little by little. So
Heck yeah,
Yeah.
dude.
yeah,
That's freaking
Yeah.
awesome.
but I like people seeing have success with being successful with things that were formerly thought as being pretty difficult. Because with croc monitors, there was like in the last like what year and a half, there's been like 5 different people that's produced croc monitors in the U.S.
Yep.
Mhm.
So that's good. I like when people basically crack codes on different types of animals. So
Mhm.
Yeah, 100%.
yeah, and John and
Yeah.
Dragna they produced some Spencers, so that's good.
Mhm. Yes, Johnny boy.
Yeah, John's great. Yeah,
Right, Johnny. Johnny
yeah.
the
But my
Italian
favorite
man.
always will be the Varanus Kamini. The Varanus Kamini are really amazing.
Mhm.
Yeah, hell yeah, dude.
Yeah, and the polymorphism with the Varanus Kamini, you could have high white animals, high yellow animals. You could have banded animals. You have darker animals. So I really like their look. Um, and they produce well, but they're not as straightforward as a Salvatore, which is also good, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, and they start to get down to a more manageable size because my males are maybe 5 feet. They could get bigger. I've seen like monster Kamini, but a normally fed like animal that's fed to be healthy, like 5 feet for a male and like 4 feet for a female. That's pretty average, but they
Mhm.
could get bigger than that. But it's not just their length and also their width. They're not as bulky as like a
Mhm.
Salvatore.
Right, right.
They're maybe half as bulky as your average Salvatore. So it starts becoming a more manageable size, and they're super intelligent. So that to me, even though they're becoming more popular, I think that's an extremely underrated species.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
And so like which I know that you'd posted like you posted like a high white animal, right? Or one that was going heading that way.
Yeah, I've posted the whiteouts in the past.
Yeah.
So what I posted today was actually the Semarensis. I didn't post the Kamini, but the Kamini that I work with are the ones that are termed as whiteouts. They're I believe they come from a German zoo, and then they were brought into the U.S.
Mhm.
and they were bred here. John Dragna had worked with them, And that's the ones I really focus on, the high white ones. But they do have other ones. They have banded ones. They have ones with high black. They have ones that are more mashed. They have all different kinds of looks. So
Yeah, that's I was just scrolling through. I was like, "Oh man, that thing's freaking wild." And then I didn't know if that's like your point of focus or whether you were working with some of the other ones too.
I do work with some of the other ones, but I really do focus on the high white ones. I mean,
Mhm.
that's really my focus with those guys. Um, I would like to work with some banded ones, but they're hard to come across the banded ones because these are different locales, and it's kind of similar to almost like carpet pythons, right? A lot of the carpet pythons we have here, we think they come from such and such region, but then when you actually see like field reports or
From
people that
there,
see them in the wild, you'll be like, well, coastal doesn't look like that, and we're almost dictating
Yeah,
to them what they should look like, but they're seeing it in the wild in situ, right?
yeah, yeah,
So that's
that
how it is
is,
almost with the common eye. They'll post all over, and then you see they have totally different looks from all over.
yeah,
So I'm trying to get as many looks as possible, but I have to have some level of focus, right? So I
yeah,
focus on what I like the most, which is the whiteouts. So
dude,
heck
hell
yeah.
yeah,
I absolutely love when people, keepers in the U.S., try to tell the folks that see the animals in the wild, that are around the animals in the wild, how those animals should behave, how they should look, everything. It's like you realize like they've probably seen like 100 of them in the last month. This is probably, you know, just stop talking.
when I started realizing that because I have Brettles outside. I don't think I told you guys that. I have Brettles and I have diamonds outside.
damn,
Oh, I remember you
So
were
I have
talking about planning doing that, but I didn't know you had got them out there.
No, they went out this season. So I have
Heck
them over
yeah.
by my the field where the tegu pens are.
Mhm.
yeah,
I'll show you next time you're here. Anyway, so I
Yeah.
have some of the like the hypo stone washes and hypo headstone washes and stuff. That's what I have for the raise up Brettles, and
Yes.
they're doing really well outside. But so I started looking into it when I started getting all my Brettles and getting my diamonds, and I started looking into all that data with other python species there. And I would see that, and I thought it was pretty funny. Like, well, coastal's not supposed to look like that. And I was like, well, how are you dictating to them? They're looking at it in their yard.
Yeah,
mhm,
yeah, exactly, exactly. I feel like that's an element, especially when it comes to Morelia. Uh, Now, like when we see like a coastal or a jungle, like we're used to seeing them now, however many generations captive bred, more often than not coming from some kind of line where there's a focus to get it as yellow as possible or as contrasted as possible. And then you see somebody in a Morelia group post the one they see in their yard, and they're like, that can't be one of these. They're supposed to look like this. Opens up cage and like pulls out fat, slobby Morelia. It's just like, not quite, buddy.
Yeah, no, definitely. There was a question actually that someone had asked me. If I don't know if you guys want to address this, because someone had asked me earlier when they saw your guys' notes about the podcast. Well, how do you do so many different species, and what works
yeah,
well for you? Kind of like one all
Mm,
encompassing tip. I mean, is that something
mhm,
you guys wanted to cover? Or
yes,
yeah,
absolutely,
100%, dude.
okay, so I told him, I was like, yeah, I'll cover it during the podcast. I'll just tell it from my perspective. With me, I try to get animals that where I could kind of streamline their care. So if you see with the Varanids, I do have some exceptions like the Lace and Spencers, but I basically have animals where their care is similar. It would almost be the equivalent of like in pythons, for example. If I had like Python Curtis, so if I had Python Curtis and Bronger's Mai, and I had Brett Stein, I had like different short tail and blood pythons, right?
Hmm.
They all get similar care, right? You can have those animals one where I give them similar care. That's what I try to do here, but with lizards, basically, right?
mhm,
Right.
Because I feel a lot of times like we've bred snakes so long, and we have such really good systems for snakes, and I feel with lizards that's not necessarily the case, at least not to that extent, right? And
Mm,
that's what I'm
yeah.
trying to do here, because I said, you know what, I really want to do what a lot of the snake guys do, but do it with lizards, right?
Yeah.
So I try to streamline it. I streamline it with my varanids. I streamline my processes with my outdoor animals to as much as possible. Some of them get slightly different diets, but usually, if there's a species that has totally different care requirements, totally different diet, totally different temperature parameters, and it's just way different than what I have here, I'm probably not going to work with it, even if it's pretty
Yeah.
cool, because I need to streamline things here so that it's more uniform. So that
mhm,
works well with me trying to get animals that have at least similar care requirements.
Hmm.
That works well. And the second thing for me is just basically being attentive, because I take notes on like everything. Like I like
Right.
anally take notes if an animal is basking more, if an animal is eating more ravenously, if an animal is going off feed. I take notes in my phone and I have them more organized, because I'm basically just observing, right?
Hmm.
So then when I see a change, it's more likely that I can react to it, whether a change is positive or negative. Okay, this is not working out for this animal. It's not eating as well, and it's not cycling or anything. It's just the body weight's going down, the conditions going down. Um, or conversely, if it's going really well and the animal's starting to cycle, right? Because I don't want to basically have a positive outcome and then have no idea how I got
How you got
there, right?
there, yeah.
Right. Exactly.
So I mean, it's not a perfect science. So, but basically, I try to observe as much as possible. I think the reasoning for that is, I mean, I don't want to date myself because I feel like I'm still pretty young. But back when I first started with reptiles, when I was really young, when my family, I mean, they didn't have the internet, right?
Mhm.
And the
Hmm.
library, you could get a book that was, maybe written 30 years prior, right? I
Mhm.
didn't
Right.
live around a lot of reptile people, right? Because I lived in New York City. So basically, the animals we had to be really meticulous and observe them, right? We had to be like anally observe them, and every little nuance that changed, we had to record, and we had to see, what was happening, right? We really had to pay attention to that. And I'm not saying that you can't get that nowadays, but I think people a lot of times complain about the resources that they didn't have back then. But I'm actually kind of grateful for it, because then back
Mhm.
then I was forced to really observe these animals. And now that I have these resources, you have all these resources, but you still really pay attention to like little nuances and things. Um,
Yeah.
so I guess that's what works for me is, I mean, one, trying my best to streamline things within reason. I do have exceptions like Cyclura, lace monitor, Spencers, but I try to streamline it within reason. Two, I just really just try to pay attention. And three, I accept the truth that as much as we think we know and as much as we think we're experts, I don't think any of us are experts. Not
Yep.
even close.
That's
In
true.
my opinion. I think
That's true.
some of us are just more experienced than others. And then once I accepted that, I'm like, you know what? You don't know anything. You don't know
Mhm.
anything. You're just observing these animals and you're doing your best. And you may be more experienced than the next person. Um, but I think in the big scheme of things, the amount of information we have now about these animals is pretty insignificant. I think 10 years from now it looks totally different. 20 years from now it looks totally different. I mean,
Right.
our industry in general is kind of in its infancy, which I think honestly is really exciting, right? Because we have
Yes.
Yeah.
so much room to learn, so much room to streamline things. It makes it so interesting the future, because we're in the beginning. We're kind of like pioneers in this. I mean, there's people that
Yeah.
came before us, like Kevin's generation and generations before that. But I think we're still in the beginning. So I think it's a really exciting time to be into reptiles. So.
Dude, hell yeah.
No, I agree, and I think we're seeing what that next wave really looks like as it comes over into reptiles like snakes and lizards and stuff. Because if you think about like a lot of amphibian keepers, like I remember as a kid, like going to a place like Black Jungle Terrarium Supply, you
Mhm.
walk in there and everything's in a living terrarium, planted out, like oh, it looks freaking amazing, and you're like, well, it's a slice of the jungle, but most reptile folks, with a few exceptions here and there, we're still kind of keeping on the more minimalistic side, just kind of like, oh, it's got a fake plant and a branch and a water bowl, so I'm doing okay, and now we're slowly seeing it, bleed over now, where it's like, oh, I decked out this amazing enclosure, I figured out how to put pieces of wood together and foam and I made a rock, and now it looks really cool, but we're starting to see that kind of bleed over. So I agree. I think it's really, now is a really exciting time to be invested in reptiles and learning about keeping and husbandry.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, I have some, I guess, controversial thoughts with that, but in terms of the positive, I do think a lot of the keepers that are coming in are really looking at it from like a different perspective. A lot of them
Mhm.
are saying, I want this larger enclosure, especially if it's your pet. I can understand if it's a breeding
Right.
facility, you really need to have things as streamlined as possible so you can notice when things are going wrong, right? So you have to have
Yeah.
sometimes things a bit more simplistic, right? Especially if it's indoors, right, where you don't have the help of Mother Nature outside. But nowadays, when people have smaller collections and they're hobbyists or even small time breeders, a lot of them are going for larger enclosures. Even for their snakes, that I got really excited with seeing people having their snakes in like monitor size enclosures. Because I'm
Mhm.
old school, so
Yeah.
we put stuff in racks and smaller enclosures, which I have now. I'm not knocking it at all. I think absolutely have their purpose. But I think in some instances, nice large, display style enclosures are, I mean, they're great for you. They're more enjoyable for the keeper, and they're also more enjoyable for the animals themselves, right? In
Mhm.
terms of like just their, not just their production, but their overall husbandry and health. So I like
Mhm.
seeing that people are thinking of things differently. And for me, since I keeping things outdoors, I'm really pumped about people keeping things outdoors. All these blue
Mhm.
tongue breeders that are like, you know what? We're putting all these goddamn things outside. I'm not having 50 racks in my house. I'm not doing this anymore. I want to have a
Right.
guest bedroom. I'm putting these things outside. So, well, you can't do that
Ah.
everywhere, of course. Like in Florida, you could
Right.
do that, especially South Florida. You could do it in Central Florida. Ron's doing it, and I
Mhm.
honestly think that's a large part of it because people see Ron doing it, and it makes it more tangible, right?
Mhm.
So,
Right.
and he's always been a pioneer with stuff like that, especially outdoor keeping. But when they see someone that's respected saying, well, you know what? I mean, it's great having them in racks. There's nothing against that. You've done great with them in racks. But, there's another alternative. Maybe you'll like doing this. And I've seen at least like 4 or 5 different keepers in Florida start keeping them outside. I want to be, the person to start doing basically that, but do it in the Carolinas. So,
Dude, hell yeah.
Heck yeah, dude. I'm here for it.
yeah, but that's really exciting. I mean, there's tons of things I'm excited about. Um, Yeah, so that's in terms of like when people ask me like, "Oh, you work with so many different species." To me, it doesn't seem like that many species, to be perfectly honest with you. But
Mhm.
I think from an outsider's perspective, maybe it seems like that. And I mean,
Mhm.
that's what works for me. Um, and I think it's also just just finding your system, just finding what you're good at and what works for you, what you get good results at, and be open to other ideas if you have to modify that. And don't like
Right.
blindly follow someone's plan. Because if I did, like Kevin's a great breeder, Kevin McCurley. If I did what he did here, I would do poorly because it just
Mhm.
doesn't, fit my personality type. And there's a lot of
Right.
good breeders, even like Ron and all these amazing, amazing breeders. But if I blindly followed anyone's system, I think it wouldn't necessarily work out well for me because we all have different personalities, different styles, uh,
Mhm.
different lifestyles, not just styles of keeping reptiles. So I think basically I just try to absorb as much information as possible from all these different avenues, and then I figure out well what's going to work best for me and the animals, and what do I think would have the best results. And then if it blows up in my face, then I have to change it. So
Yeah. I
Right.
remember before you moved, and you're like trying to think of like what other species you're going to get into. You're like, okay, well, I know that these things work in this kind of temperature parameters. What kind of things do you think will also fit into that kind of similar parameters? So I don't have to change a whole lot with the way that I'm keeping, but I can expand and grow into different species. I remember talking to you a bunch about it. Different species, like we were talking about the Shinosaurus and some of those other species too.
oh yeah, no, definitely. And honestly, I think I really underestimated the species that you could do here. I
Mhm.
mean, and
Mhm.
I shouldn't have really because we have like the perfect example, Burt Langerwerf, right? Look at all
Yeah.
the species he worked with, and some species that people never thought you could do outdoors. For example, red tegus. We have red tegus here, right? No
Yep.
Mhm.
one would anyone that actually knows about red tegus would never think you could breed them outdoors in Alabama, ever, right?
Mhm.
But he had specially designed terraria where his microclimates were, quite different from his surrounding area.
Mhm.
I don't have my red tegus out all year. Um, I actually have them brumating. I showed you guys all the bins in my guest bedroom,
Yeah.
right? So I brumate
It
them
was
in
a
bins.
lot of animals, guys.
Yeah, I brumate them in bins here, just because that's what works out best for me. Because he basically had like cement basements, right? He
Mhm.
basically built a cement structure that was partially in the ground, and then he had glass tops for them. So he basically made it like a well insulated basement. And where I live here, I have you saw all the ponds and the swamps and stuff we have, Jeremy. So
Mhm.
I have the enclosures on the driest southern exposed area on my property. But even that's really not dry enough because, as you guys know, cold isn't great for most reptiles, right?
Yep.
Um, Being wet isn't great for most reptiles, with excessive wetness. But you know what's
Yep.
really bad? Being cold and wet.
The
Cold and
I don't
wet.
combination.
like
Yeah.
but but the reptiles really don't like it. So
Yeah.
that's the reason I really don't have my red tegus outside. It's just too humid here, and it's too cold for too long. There was too many obstacles for me to really overcome. So basically, I emulate what they would do in the wild. They go down to a burrow, and they, for the most part, stay there. The entire cold season. So
Mhm.
once I let them start brumation outside, they start brumation. They brumate for about 2 months outside, and once we start getting to the danger zone in terms of temperatures for them outdoors, I place them indoors in bins with wheat straw, and then I put them back out in the spring. So that's a system that works well for me. I've been doing it for quite a few years here. But red tegus are not easy to do in South Carolina at all.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
too humid, a little too cold, and it's not just that it's too cold. The cold season lasts too long because
Mhm.
naturally, where this
Mm.
species is from, the Salvatore rufescens, it's not cold for quite this long. So they're waking up when it's like mid-February, like
So
Valentine's Day. They're waking up, but it's too cold to put them outdoors.
yeah.
So I mean, it's a challenge, and I like that challenge. Um, but if you think in terms of the positive note with that, that helps out with like regulations, for example, right?
Mhm.
Because you don't have to worry about, well,
Right.
they're going to say, well, red tegus can live in this state. Well, I intentionally try to do it here, and I can't do it, and I'm pretty experienced, obviously. So so that helps out. I'm not really worried about Salvatore rufescens ever getting regulated here because it would be pretty illogical. So.
Yeah. So if you have them waking up early, how do you like combat that? Or do you have a trigger line where you're like, okay, we had 8 days that were above this temperature, they're going outside, or how do you run that for springtime?
For me, once the temperature is out, so when they go outside, is once the overnight temperatures are consistently in like around 44 or higher. So like
Mhm.
upper 40s, that's when I could put them outside. But for the tegus I have here, I have some pure Argentine tegus, where it's a more southern form, so it's further from the equator. They're a little bit more cold tolerant, so sometimes I get away with putting them straight outside. But all my Paraguayan and Paraguayan Argentine crosses, I have to set them up indoors usually for about 6 weeks. So
Mhm.
basically, the beginning portion of when they wake up, they're awake indoors, and then they go outside. And this usually winds up happening like late March, early April, something like
Mhm.
that. So, and I pretty much streamline their process. I do, something pretty different here. I don't separate the animals. Um, I basically separate my whole colony gets separated on the same day. I don't know anyone that really does that. They wait for the females to look gravid and this and that. I've never really done that because if you miss a female, a clutch get eaten, or if a female's too far along her cycle, she'll fight with the male.
Mhm.
Basically, I know from looking at my records, right, that my females almost always start laying the very end of May. They lay all June, and then the first week of July. So you know what I do? June 1st, I separate all of them, all
Yep.
of them,
Mhm.
and then we have really good success here. So they basically stay together the early portion of the spring. They breed like crazy in May, and you could see it. The males lose interest once it hits like May 20th, 21st. I hardly have any males courting here. And I start seeing some gravid females towards the very, very end of May. They might start laying, and June 1st, unless I see them, they're obviously going to lay earlier than that. I separate all of them, so that
Mhm.
I try to just streamline it like that and notice patterns like that. I mean, even with the Varanids, I don't want to jump around too much. A lot of times people will keep Varanids together for a long period of time. Once my Varanids lock once and I know she's cycling, I never put them together ever again. And I get
Mhm.
a clutch. So I think some of my systems that I have here are pretty different. And, I'm always experimenting. Some of my systems work out great, and some of my systems I think they're going to be great, and they're not. And I have to modify them. So.
But I mean, that's also a testament to keeping the records that you do and paying attention to everything that you do. Because I feel like one of the things that we've heard a lot on some of the more recent episodes that we've been doing is like people just talking about like paying attention to their animals, like watching their animals, being just more meticulous overall about paying attention to those animals. So when you're talking about a larger scale operation, like that comes into play so much more because exactly as you're saying, like you know your window for production, and you know, okay, well, I could go through and pull this animal then and do this here and do that there, but I've looked at everything, I've got the records of everything, and know like if I just do this in one foul swoop, I'll pretty much be good to go. And to be able to have it go from thought process to proven is just a testament to what record keeping can really do.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what works well for me. I mean, I've seen people that have, techniques that they're really feel strong about that work well for them. But for me, keeping it organized is
Mhm.
that's what works well for me and keeps all the animals here, nice and healthy. But With the red tegus, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but did you guys see that melanistic red tegu?
Bro, I was gonna ask you about
Yes.
that.
That's
Yes.
cool, right?
That is really cool.
So the reason I was mentioning that, since we started talking about red tegus, I was like, I should probably tell them about the different looks we're going for here. So
Yes.
as you guys know, we can't breed Salvatore Marinate in this state, right? I'm not going to get into that, but that's black and white tegus and blue tegus. So I basically said, if I have to do red tegus, right, I'm going to go all out, and I really want as much variety as humanly possible. I want the coolest red tegus in the world.
Hell yeah.
So we have a lot of different projects here. I actually have a hypomelanistic animal. I actually
Yes.
purchased a project for someone else, and that seems to be heritable. I produced a baby. I haven't posted it yet. Maybe after this podcast, I'll wind up posting it. But it seems to be like a heritable project. I haven't gone out and formally said that yet because I don't know 100%. But I purchased these animals, and the original owner that imported them directly from Argentina, he imported a special animal that was termed hypo. They also called it ghost at one point, and they called it pastel, I believe it was named. And he produced from it. He let one animal go early to a breeder that passed away named Eric Sikowski, and a bunch of possets are kind of the reason I'm mentioning that. A bunch of possets are floating in the industry, but I have what we believe are 100% hets here, assuming that it is simple recessive, and I bred those together this past year and have animals that I produce that are honestly unlike anything I've ever seen. But I basically want to make sure it's heritable before I go forward and say, you know what? It's not a feeling. This is 100% correct. So we have that, and then we kind of have the opposite of that. We have a hypermelanistic animal. So
I love, dude, that thing. I was hyped when I saw that.
it was so strange. It's actually a pretty cool story because sometimes you get weird things that happen in clutches. If babies hatch out too early or too late, temperatures are too high or too low, it could be an artifact of incubation. So I had this baby come out that was black and literally like blue, like as blue as the sky, right? Like an aqua blue almost. And I was like, well, that's weird. And then I had another one hatch out of the same box. I said, well, that's kind of weird. And then I always, because I worked in, as you guys know, as a researcher for many years, worked in labs, right? So I implement some of those systems here. So I have a second incubator. I always put things in 2 incubators to have a redundancy. So that same clutch, I had 2 boxes in a totally different incubator. So out of the different incubator, they started hatching out a few days later. Then I got these black babies that had aqua all over them. I'm like,
well, that's really weird.
Really weird. So, and it was the exact opposite of what I expected because I bred high white animals, right? I had red animals that had a ton of white on them, and they had patterns that were very unique because obviously I stare all day at a lot of red tegus, for certain times of the year. The patterns looked really unique, but similar to one another. And they were high white. There was some pure Argentine tegus I had gotten. And I was like, well, let me breed them together because I really want to, extend that look because it looks so cool. I just want a really high white animal with that unique pattern. And I'm over here expecting these nice high white tegus to come out or something that's going to turn into high white. And I'm like, well, that's kind of the exact opposite of what I expected.
That is not what I was expecting.
And we produced approximately a quarter of the clutch. It was a 7 out of 27 babies, I want to say. Damn. I have to double check my records. It was almost exactly a quarter of the clutch that was melanistic. And they have varying degrees of hypermelanism. The females seem to be quite a bit darker, and the males are dark and they have like reddish bellies and like reddish hues coming in on the top. Time will tell if they stay that way when they're full-grown adults. But regardless, they're very unique. And even if they're not fully black as adults, they're definitely going to be darker than your typical tegu because they already have good size to them. So I'm really excited about that. So what did you guys think when you saw them?
Dude, I was like, hold on. Maybe this is lighting. And then the video changed a little bit. I was like, oh, man, those things are freaking wild, man.
They're nuts.
They're so cool looking.
They're freaking nuts.
So roughly how big are they now?
They're about the biggest one I have because they slow down in the winter. Even though I try to keep them up, sometimes Mother Nature, that takes the best of the situation. I want to say the biggest one I have now is about 2 feet long or close to 2 feet, like 22 inches long.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. But for
Yeah.
me, I mean, their appetites, even though I keep the babies indoors and I keep them really warm, I mean, they know they cue into temperature drops just like snakes, just like,
Yeah.
all these other animals, right? They know far better than we do. So their appetite decreases quite a bit in the winter, so they eat enough to stay healthy, but they don't grow that much in the winter. For me, at least. Maybe
Right.
so you can speak to someone else, and someone else tells you that all their tegus grow a lot in the winter. With me, most of my tegus, the babies that I keep up for the winter, I would say at least half of them slow down quite a bit in growth.
Yeah.
But they have good size to them. And then we have a red albino coming in now, a pure red albino that was
Yes.
produced over in the farm in Ganuelas, Argentina, and that project went to someone in Florida, and then he loaned that project out to someone else, and they were very successful with it. And now a couple breeders or a few breeders in the U.S. have them. Anyways, so we have a red albino coming in literally
Oh,
as soon as temperatures are warm enough to ship.
yes.
Yes. Heck yeah, dude.
I have a male
That's
coming
super
in.
exciting.
I have, yeah, me too. Um, so we have the hypomelanistic looking one. I'm not saying it's definitely heritable. I'm not saying it's definitely anything, but it appears hypomelanistic.
Mhm.
I have what appears to be the hypermelanistics, the black ones. We have albinos coming in. I have one that so far I'm terming Aztec that kind of has like I might rename it Labyrinth, but it almost reminds me of like a Labyrinth Burmese python.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
I bred those together, and then a good portion of the babies wound up having that. I have a feeling that's probably
Polygenic, yeah.
polygenic, but time will tell. So
Mm.
Heck yeah, dude.
we have a lot of different looks. I have high whites that are not the ones that produce the melanistic, just regular high whites. I have deep reds. That I have some burgundy looking animals. I actually have the male. His name is Ron Burgundy.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, man.
and he literally looks burgundy. And I bred him to some females and weren't quite as burgundy as him, but they did have a similar look. I mean, I have at least 10 different distinct looks here on the farm that I'm working with that I've been able to reproduce. I'm not saying all of them follow Mendelian genetics are going to be
Mhm.
simple recessive or incomplete dominant. I'm not claiming that at all. I'm actually
Right.
quite confident that some of them aren't, that a lot of them are
Polygenic.
polygenic.
Yeah.
But we're trying to go for as many looks as possible. I want to, really hone in on that, and we're really happy with the results. And red tegus make amazing pets. And for me, with larger or large-ish lizards, you usually don't hear me say that pets for everyone, but I really think an Argentine tegu um, is an excellent pet, even for like families or anything like that. I mean, they're really cold tolerant, they're heat tolerant, they have varied diets, they're very very placid. Um, I know people that set them up in enclosures in their home where they kind of have enclosures they can walk into, and then they roam the home, supervised. So I do think that's one of the few exceptions where it's a sizable lizard, but it's a really good pet for almost anyone. So
Yeah. Dude, that's
Heck
awesome.
yeah, dude.
When those hypermelanistics hatch out, you just say, "The blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice."
oh, you know it.
Oh God.
Yeah, no, I thought of you when I produced that one. The first one I'm actually gonna name Rob.
Yes. It's weird that it ended up
Um,
being a girl, but
oh man, you were glitching out a little bit. Hopefully, you guys could hear me though.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
clear.
Cool. So we have the aneries here too. So I'm not sure if you guys saw
Ooh.
the anery. The aneries, I'm going for a bunch of different looks too. I have
Mm.
some really high white aneries. And then I have some really dark aneries, and
Mhm.
they're pure red tegus as well. And then I have some that almost have a zebra type look to them, where they have like really dark bands, but the rest of the body's white. So we're trying to, because that anery mutation. You guys are familiar with anery tegus anery red
Yeah.
tegus before I
Yeah, I've
keep
seen
on.
them. Yeah.
Yeah. So the good thing with that is that when you have a red tegu, especially in the males and with certain females, that red coloration is pretty dominant on the animal. So
Mhm.
sometimes, especially in males, it's pretty challenging to see what's underneath, to see that pattern, right? To see the
Yep.
different nuances and pattern. Once you remove that red pigmentation in the aneries, it kind of gives you more to work with aesthetically. You could
Hmm.
have a lot of different pattern looks and a lot of different contrast looks. It basically kind of opens your eyes to the possibilities when you have an anetheristic tegu in terms of pattern and color and shades. So we're really trying to get a lot of different looks for the aneries as well here. So um, yeah, so we're really excited about that too. And there's tons of other looks that we have here for the red tegus. That's just literally off the top of my head.
Dude, that is so fucking awesome.
It's super exciting. It's super exciting because for so many people are just like, it's a red tegu. So to see like all these different, first of all, potential polygenic and Mendelian genetic traits popping up in this species, and like being able to find those little nuances, like it opens up a whole new potential for not just you as the breeder, but also for clientele, right? Like if you got that look that somebody's just like, that's what I've been looking for, like that's great.
Yeah, no, I mean, I got pretty fortunate in terms of red tegus because if I had to choose one species that I had to work with in terms of tegus here, if someone said you have to pick one, no other ones, it would be red tegus. They tend to be the most placid. They're the calmest of the tegus, in my opinion. I've worked with all of them. And then pretty much all the morphs besides albinos and blue tegus exist in red tegus because you have the albinos, you have the aneries, you have what people are calling hypo, hopefully this hypermelanistic thing that's going on. So all the morphs are really with the red tegus. I mean, I mean you do have some, for example, the albino with blue tegus, but by and large they have the most variety. And in addition to that, they have the best temperaments. Even if you speak to over in Canuelas, Argentina, where they have a tegu farm where they have a few different types of tegus, all the workers on that farm, they all say they prefer to work with the red tegus because they're calmer. So, it's awesome. It's a great pet. I'm really excited about it.
Heck yeah, dude.
That's really cool. And I don't follow the tegu like world as closely, but I feel like there is not as much work being done even in the venue of black and whites as far as the patterning and the stuff that you're picking out and choosing to run with. I feel like I just don't see that with the black and whites,
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it's something that people haven't taken advantage of yet. And what I also like about the situation is it's basically making the best out of a situation because it was honestly, I feel a blessing in disguise that I was kind of forced to work only with Salvatore Rufessens because I don't feel like I would have been so tuned into these different looks if I had so many different types of tegus here. It really forced me to really specialize in the reds and specialize in the different looks. So now we do have all this variety here. And if I was allowed to have, the blue tegus and the black and white tegus and all the hybrids, maybe that wouldn't have happened. But yeah, I think that I mean, black and white tegus are great. Blue tegus are great. I love blue tegus very much. But red tegus is what I'm excited about now.
Dude, hell yeah,
dude. Heck yeah.
All right, so we are running low on time. We're hitting just past that hour mark. So we're going to wrap up with our final question that we ask on every episode, and it's going to catch you completely off guard. Are you ready?
Sure.
What in the realm of reptiles, be it something that you're working with or something that you've seen online, what is something that's got you really hyped up about reptiles right now? Something got you excited?
For me, it's people keeping more outdoors. I mean, that's no big surprise. Like I was telling you guys before, like when I see all these people, like I see some people putting diamonds and bretels outside and putting all these blue tongues outside and having outdoor runs and doing all this stuff outdoors. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's put them all outside. I mean, you can't always do it depending on where you live. But if you live somewhere where it's an option, at least for part of the year, do it.
Heck yeah.
That's awesome. And if people want to find out more about what you're doing, if they want to see some of the pictures or videos of the stuff that you're working with, where should they follow you?
I mean, pretty much everything I have is under my name, Josh Ortiz. So where I'm from, that's a pretty common name. So I usually put Herpetofauna by Josh Ortiz, like in my Facebook profile. And if they look up Herpetofauna, if they just do a general search on like Instagram or any of the social media platforms, I pretty much have all of them, at least to my knowledge, all the popular ones at least.
Hell yeah!
I haven't seen you do any TikTok dances, Josh.
I will. You're gonna regret those words.
Oh gosh,
Josh, please delete your TikTok
account. Please stop the TikToks.
This is too much. And you can't delete me or block me. I'll just get a different username.
Oh no!
You just make it
Oh
worse for yourself.
gosh.
So you may as well
It's
just
just
accept whatever I send you.
it's just gonna be dances with goose.
I'll get Dan over here. I'll have Dan do the dancing with me. We'll both send it to you.
He'll
Oh
do.
no, the
Dan'll do the
truffle
truffle
shuffle.
shuffle, baby.
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty epic. Awesome.
Well,
That's gonna be my next phone call with Dan. Be like, dude, you're going to tell Lena you're going to South Carolina to do the truffle shuffle, man.
That'll be awesome.
oh
We're gonna
my
do YouTube soon too,
god.
so I should mention that. I have a YouTube channel,
Dude,
but I think I have like one video posted like years ago. But we're gonna start hard at it. Maybe for like the inaugural episode, I'll get you guys down here and we'll take a look at everything.
Yeah, that'd be so dope, dude.
And we could herp when you come down. I know a good timber spot. I know a good spot for lots of alligators, and it's only like 30 minutes
yes.
from my house.
So I just got a new position at work in October. So now I have pretty much every weekend off. So, and I can kind of take time when I need it. So I have much more open schedule now, so I can actually come down and visit.
Cool. Let's do it. Let's do it in the spring. We could do like a YouTube
Yeah.
thing where we show all the animals, blah blah blah, and then we'll do like a herping thing. And I know all the good spots because I got skunked plenty of times, so I've been able to hold it down. I know a spot where literally, if it's reasonably warm out, we'll see alligators. I don't. Now that I say this, it's not going to happen. But every time I go out, I see alligators every single time, and I'm talking about like monsters. So
damn.
it's 30 minutes from my house. I can show you guys the spot. I've seen babies out in the wild. I've seen all kinds of stuff. I'll show you guys the spot. You guys will really enjoy it.
Dude, hell yeah.
Hell yeah, dude.
Josh, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Yeah,
It's been
dude.
good catching up. I love you. Thank you so much.
All right, guys. Love you. Bye.
Yes,
you,
we'll
dude.
catch you.
Have a good night.
You too.